let's call the meeting to order and start with the roll call.
Ms. Bex is excused. Ms. Cooper Payton. Ms. Harrell. Ms. Hetland.
Present.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Ms. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Orcherton.
Here.
Ms. Salmon.
Here?
Ms. Snyder.
Here.
Okay. Next, we need to move to approval of minutes of 2 previous meetings, since we didn't have a quorum last time. The September 11th meeting, anybody have any questions or comments? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Same for October 23rd. Anybody have any questions or comments? If not,
I can't comment. I wasn't here.
okay.
Can we
Yeah.
just have 1 second, because I
Oh,
haven't had a chance to
absolutely.
look over this.
Oh, sure.
Because I think I just got them today, so I haven't had
they
a
did
chance to
come
look
today.
over them.
Okay,
On Friday, I
we
think.
can wait a moment. Yeah.
I'll get her a chair.
Okay.
Okay. Oops. Oh, Barb wasn't here anyway, so, okay. All in favor of approving the minutes from October 23rd? Say aye.
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 Okay, minutes are approved. We now are having a change to the agenda. We're going to start with the new business. So,
Just another note of change to the agenda is that Makerspace Urbana will not be giving a grant presentation until
Right.
December 11th now. So you can remove them from the agenda today, and they will appear on your agenda next month.
okay, go ahead, Rachel.
Well, our new business this evening is to talk about the adoption of certain changes as recommendations to the changes of our ordinance. You had a list of proposed changes to the ordinance, as well as an Exhibit A, and I believe as an Exhibit B, you had an example of our current ordinance, what it is right now. So we discussed this a little bit at last month's meeting, but without having quorum, we were unable to vote on it. We have as a guest here this evening Mayor Diane Wolf Marlin, who wanted to say a few words about the proposal to transform the public arts program into a commission for arts and culture.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks everyone for all that you do for the city of Urbana. A few months ago, I came before you and asked you to consider this idea of expanding the scope and mission of the Arts Commission to include arts and culture for various reasons, but I think probably the most important in my mind was it was a way to recognize the diversity of our population, the incredibly important role that people from all over the world play in our community. 20% of our population roughly is born in a different nation, and they bring just a rich history, culture, language, food, everything to our community. And I thought it really was time that we intentionally take steps in any way that we can to be inclusive and welcoming and to celebrate what the people from all over the world bring to Urbana. So that was the motivation behind asking the Arts Committee. And then I thought, okay, how do we do this? And well, one of the obvious ways in my mind was through the arts program because of, well, just is a logical place to do it. So expanding arts to arts and culture just made a lot of sense to me, and so I'm glad that you've considered it and discussed it, and I just see this just opens up so many different avenues for us and more opportunities to really celebrate the richness of our community. So that's the motivation behind this, and I truly appreciate the work you've put into thinking about this. and I'm excited about the possibilities.
May I borrow your
Yes,
sheet?
you may.
So just to kind of reiterate, some of the discussions that we've had over the past few months have included looking at how lots of different cities throughout the United States have transformed their public arts program into commissions for arts and culture, and that the incorporation of culture makes, really expands opportunities around the arts and how the arts serve as a community building resource in a community. We talked a lot about what our mission and vision and things like that would look like. And so the proposed changes to the ordinance really just encapsulate that. So as we discussed in previous meetings, this includes revising the name of the commission and program throughout the ordinance towards Urbana Arts and Culture Commission or the Urbana Arts and Culture Program, adding a definition of culture as follows. Culture includes but is not limited to historic and contemporary traditions of performance, custom, ritual, celebration, fashion, cuisine, knowledge, storytelling, heritage, and oral transmission. And that the mission would celebrate and nurture the city of Urbana's cultural and artistic diversity. We have a drafted vision statement that appears below. And then there's certain other pieces that go along with your ordinance. So, for instance, number 5 acknowledges that the composition of the commission shall reflect the full diversity of the Urbana community. This is an amendment from the full diversity of the Urbana arts community to diversities that extend beyond the arts themselves. We have grants sufficient authority to the commission to approve and award grants. This is a change. So this speaks to, as we've discussed in previous meetings, giving the public arts, a proposal to give the Public Arts Commission, soon to be the Arts and Culture Commission, authority on grants over $5,000 so that the commission would be the final decision-making body on those grants. We talked about reflecting some priorities with respect to the selection of proposed arts and culture projects. And we also talked in last meeting about a little bit of discussion about how we want these priorities to look, and it might not be how they're written here. So I think this might be a point of discussion for us this evening. But as they currently read, the 3 priorities are community accessibility of arts and culture, artist accessibility to resources, and opportunities for collaboration and partnerships among and between, I think we had actually amended this already, to artistic and cultural groups.
Oh,
this was
good.
feedback from last month. I did not update your material since we were going to continue the discussion this month. And by month, I mean 2 weeks later, because our meeting was 2 weeks later than its typical time. But those are the primary changes, and you can see that your Exhibit B is our current ordinance, and so the number changes correspond with the numbers of your ordinance, what would amend.
And I would add the changes also help provide consistency to funding, as Rachel indicated, for the larger activities over $5,000, which are typically the festivals. And the way it's worked in the past is it's kind of developed over time where a group will come to one particular staff member or maybe to the mayor's office because they have a relationship with them or a history. And this just, I think, puts everybody on an even footing and provides clear expectations and consistency and fairness and transparency. So that's another significant change. And then I would add also, I think one thing I didn't say about the change to the arts and culture is it just sends a great message to the immigrant community in the city as well, which I think is important in this day and age. So,
So do you want to discuss perhaps particularly 3 priorities and as they appear here and how they may change and we might need to amend the language there? This is number 7. I think that's the primary maybe point of discussion within these proposed changes, and then once we come to a conclusion there, unless there are questions or concerns about the rest, this is what we would be voting on tonight.
Okay. There's no chance that we can do any editing on the vision statement?
No, I think there's a chance for that too.
Okay. Nothing that's going to materially change it. It's just
Yeah.
too long.
And that's fine, but as a reminder, the vision statement is usually a longer, more
Right.
detailed
Yeah, I
vision than
understand
the
that.
mission statement. So go ahead with your edits. Are there any suggestions for any of the things that you see here as proposed changes?
I guess I have a question. So if this is approved or voted on tonight, then when would these changes roll out? Like, Because I guess one question I have is like on point 6, there still seems to be a lot of open discussion around what that actually looks like. So I would hesitate to vote anyway on point 6 until we knew how the ball rolls down the hill, if that makes sense.
What this is we're voting to recommend this as suggested changes that would then go before City Council for approval. So the commission on its own doesn't get to approve this, but we get to approve it as a recommendation. As far as questions like that feel outstanding, I think we would want to clarify those as much as we can tonight before a vote takes place. So is there like a particular question?
So for example, we've talked about different ideas of like how it would look to actually approve those grants. Like, would there be some sort of evaluative process? Would there be, you know, those kinds of questions? And so they seem substantive, I guess, to deciding whether or not this body would have, you know, to make a recommendation, like that would be something that we would take on without kind of knowing more information about like the how, I guess, of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does make sense. And I think that there's two options. So it's possible, in my mind, to decide whether or not it makes sense for any proposal over $5,000 to carry enough risk, just in simply being 5,000 or above, in terms of monetary risk as well, of having to go to a body for authority versus being in juries, as we've arguably haven't previously had it, but in some ways the public arts program has. The special event funding has had it go through City Council. And then as far as the actual details of how we do that, we can determine that down the line. That doesn't have to be determined today.
Eric, go ahead.
So it seems to me that the issue with respect to 6 is whether we should continue to have the City Council make decisions on these larger expenditures, or whether it's really better to have this commission make those decisions. And I think as a point of context, and you know your concern about whether we would have the capability to make good decisions, I would put that in the context that these large ticket items are 2 or 3 of hundreds of items that the City Council sees every year. So each one of them receives less than 1% of the council's attention. And so, you know, so in my opinion, you know, serving both on this commission and on the council, I would like to see the responsibility for vetting these proposals actually devolve to this commission on the grounds that I think the commission is in a position to give the proposals more careful attention and than the council can.
In response to that, I don't disagree with you at all, and my point is less about who and more about process.
I agree. I think it's hard to like be able, with good knowledge, approve something when we don't know logistically exactly how it's going to work, you know?
But the logistics are not what you're approving this evening.
Well, sure, yeah. I know, I know.
Because that would require more discussion, and everyone would get a chance to give input about like what would make it a fair and transparent and, I guess, fruitful process for everybody.
I think I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I think part of, I would find it much more reassuring if I knew, like, so if we recommend this, then how long will it be before the council either accepts or rejects it? Because, like, if it's 2 weeks, then that's a totally different thing than 6 months from now. Because 6 months from now gives us time to invent a process for, you know, for everybody to go through and, you know, to have software written or whatever the heck it is we decide needs to happen. But, like, that, you know, even a month from now is way too soon.
Brandon?
So the intention would be to bring it to council within weeks, not months. because we need to initiate this grant cycle very soon. However, we don't need to fully define to the grant applicants exactly the process by which the decision will be made. You can just get a lot of information about what your process is likely to look at based on the two processes that have happened in the past. One is the grants process as you know it. Our inclination right now would be to utilize a juried process so that there's a jurying that occurs and that the recommendation is then brought forward to this body. So you are still benefiting from an initial jurying, very, very similar to what's happening now. It's just we don't allow the jury to make the decision on the larger grants. The other process is how special events, how the $5,000 and greater special events have been vetted by council, as Eric was explaining. And in those instances, staff would prepare a memo to, we would collect information, get additional information from the applicants. We were not aided by a formal process. We were not aided by a jury, and then we would just bring those recommendations to the city council, often getting the mayor's input on what that recommendation would be. And so those are largely the two methods that we're looking to combine. So instead of coming to council for approval, we come to this body and we'd rely upon the information gathered both in the application process and the jurying process to bring that forward. And the commission can essentially, because you're actually being formally given an authority by the council, if this were to be approved, they would give it to you in a very vague way. It wouldn't be a lot more specific than this, most likely. But this body can then create rules, if you so choose, procedures or policies pertaining to how you do that. It wouldn't be a policy or procedure for the whole grants program, but it would be a policy or procedure for that specific task, that you've been asked to do. So I don't necessarily, from a staff perspective, I don't necessarily see that we have a lot of latitude to dramatically change the way in which we prepare these for consideration by this body or the council. And given the shortness of time, if the commission chooses not to act on that recommendation, we still will need to proceed with processing the larger grant applications, and we would more or less, I think, we would default back to the city council to make those approvals, but it would be aided by the having the jurying process, I guess. So I think that's how we would do it.
We're still having authority to vet and really oversight before we make recommendations, right? That's not being taken away. That's actually, it sounds like we're
That's
getting
being
more
added.
of it. It's been added, right? It's enlarged.
The request
Yes.
would be to add authority that the commission does not currently have. As an advisory commission, you have no authority right now to approve or deny grant applications.
Mm-hmm.
This would give you that authority for only those grants amounts,
Up to.
$5,000
Up to.
and above. And you could also say, well, we want that for all of them, but we felt that the jurying process has worked well in with that regard, that this body's had plenty of opportunities to comment on the outcomes of the jury process, and we weren't hearing that was a problem. But we know at the higher level amounts, there's often discourse that happens surrounding what's the right thing to do in that situation. And our council's certainly capable of making that decision, but they have many other things to consider. And we feel that the process would be aided over time as this body, which is the most knowledgeable about the recipients of the arts grants and the outcomes in the community, becomes the place where that conversation happens.
So is that correct to say, what I heard you say is that right now, basically the staff makes recommendations to the council as to what amount each person should get and who should be approved?
The jury.
Oh, no,
You
for the,
mean with
for
regard
the
to the
events.
special event agreement?
To clarify, for the
I mean,
events.
What happens
Yes.
currently?
Typically with mayoral guidance, too. Yeah.
This is partly, my recommendation, because currently, depending on which event you're talking about, it may be people coming to the mayor's office, one-on-one and saying, well, we got this last year, I want this much this year. And then there's, then there's that negotiation in the mayor's office, and I really don't think that's where this should occur. So the whole point of this is to get this negotiation out of the mayor's office and into a more consistent public
Yeah, more transparent.
venue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's more and more, as we get more and more festivals now, that's also becoming much more important. So
You mentioned sort of like combining that model of like the staff memo with the jury process. And so I'm just wondering, are you envisioning then for like the 5,000 and above that this process of this negotiation or conversation that's been going on, this group would then, so it's sort of like creating a jury amongst this group, but just for the larger amounts?
Yes, and so they would actually come, if their memo was prepared, they would come and present their proposal for funding in front of you, in person.
But we
In this
we have
environment.
the option of having an additional jury, a traditional jury that would make a recommendation. Staff would take that information, the information in the packet, and present it. In theory, too, as we clarify this, staff could be relied upon to, look at other financial, information or try to, kind of help fine tune in accordance with whatever objectives the commission has for those. But then, yes, I envision it something like a table, and here's who applied, here's what the jury recommended. It is now up to the commission to make the final decision. I would assume, we're going to have that so it already balances out. Ideally, we would try to present you with clear options. That's something we try to do for council as well, not just leave it open-ended. And generally, the guidance we're going to need is because these groups are pitted against one another when there's limited funding. So if one asks for an increase, that means a decrease somewhere else. And so that is really what we value this group's input on is and with this recommendation and council's approval, it wouldn't just be your input, it would be your decision. That could increase you might hear more forceful arguments from applicants than we've heard in the past. You might have members of the public attend and state their opinion. There could be letters to the editor written. That's part of democracy, but this commission doesn't see a lot of that action right now, and so you would be sharing in that.
Take the heat off of you, right?
Well, and you can look at this as this is a pilot. This is a big change, so we can look at this year as the trial and see how it works. And if it's a complete disaster, then we can look at something else. But I think it can work well, and it will again provide more consistency and just people can rely upon the process.
Can I ask you, because I think this is still amorphous a little bit for all of us. Are we talking about like 50 groups or 10
no.
or
What do we have? It's like Folk and Roots. It's
we have groups that have repeatedly applied, and
Folk and
that's
Roots,
what we're talking about.
Pygmalion, CU Jazz. Did we?
Sweet Corn.
Sweet Corn, CU Jazz Festival. No, just a
Sweet
few.
Corn Festival.
It's just
And
three.
Basically, those are the three major, but the point of this, too, is that many people in the community didn't know that there was special event funding available, right? So when it is kind of on a, who's in the know about what it is, we might see more applications when it is a more public process. But that could also be where the benefit of a jury comes in to sort of vet those applications. Usually in any application process, there's the people who didn't fully fill things out or other things that this commission wouldn't even need to be troubled with.
It's a total of $40,000 as well,
Yeah.
specifically for special events over 5,000 or 5,000 and above.
And would that be separate from our existing grant program funding? It would be
Yes.
something, it wouldn't,
Yeah.
our hairs wouldn't cross? Because I know that some of those festivals apply for a public arts grant,
That's
and then
correct.
also the special events.
That's correct. But if you'll recall, this commission voted to accept the special
Right.
event
Oh, right,
funding,
yeah,
so
yeah.
it was in excess of our current budget.
And so double dipping wouldn't happen anymore.
Right.
Well, and that's one way of
Potentially.
putting it, but also the other way of putting it is that two different sets of reporting to the same body doesn't
Yeah.
need to happen anymore.
Yeah,
When it's
okay.
all coming from the city of Urbana one way or another, it's kind of funny to have two processes for one
Sure.
project.
Okay.
So it actually should benefit the grantees too to consolidate and streamline in this way.
In the,
Clarifying.
in the current events process, are there with the public arts grant process, there are clear
criterion that you're measured against? Are there similar things in the events process, or will whatever the public arts grant criterion as they're revised, will they be the measure for who should get it and who shouldn't?
I think you were going to say the current process doesn't have much of that.
No, that's what one of the challenges is. There aren't any criteria. It's
Well,
it's
maybe that's one
basically
of the
based
things
on
we
what
need
we've
to
done
get
in the
to.
past.
We need to clarify.
So you
Oh,
can
absolutely.
that would be one.
It's sort of case by case, but then,
Charge.
yeah, I think that relates also to number 7 that I talked about here, because these are 3 priorities, right? And we could actually have those mirror the grant program. We currently have I could bring it up, no, I'll just do it. This is technically part of the discussion we're having in a moment. But, you know, our current grant program has program goals, and they're more detailed than what is here. There's more than 3 of them. They're a little reiterative if you read them, but we could actually have those, and I think it would make a lot of sense, relatively match the goals of our overall commission and program, because we'd want to fund things that are in line with that are sort of mission centered.
One thing that is really helpful about them being a little bit more granular, if you will, in the current program goals is it's a lot easier to nail down. So, you know, and even for the applicant themselves, like, we're contributing to the arts or whatever, versus like, I'm doing these things that are a little bit more granular and specific.
Yeah.
I think there's some value in that too.
And, you know, you're spending public dollars, so being able to defend that expenditure is important as well.
And the clarification will be useful.
And if you'll recall at like a couple of the previous meetings, I think we've discussed some of the values of this particular body taking on that responsibility. And they were both values in the assembled expertise of who we vet to be on a public arts commission, and the expertise that each of you bring, and your connection to the arts and your awareness of these events. You're chosen for this commission because there's this deep connection with the same kinds of events that you'll see come forward in grants program requests, but also things like this body is the one that sees final reports currently. The City Council does not see final reports. And so they'll see special event reports, sure, but for our Public Arts Commission, if we think of it too as the potential of this aiding and seeding projects, they'll apply for bigger and bigger grants over time and hopefully one day not apply at all anymore because they've moved on and they're getting much bigger grants from elsewhere. But in that respect, we may see applicants for $5,000 and up festival monies that previously applied for other categories, smaller categories of funding. And this body in particular ideally has the historic knowledge or the access to gaining the historic knowledge if you're new on the commission to not only, you know, what the proposals have been in the past and how they've shifted or changed or not, but also, you know, what were the outcomes and how did people report their financials, their outcomes, evaluate themselves. And as I said before, we also don't have to make the nitty-gritty decisions today, but we will make decisions about how to, as we've talked about in this commission, how to really maybe hone how we do evaluation. I think that's come up a few times here. So we've talked about, you know, what specifics could we request, maybe even processes for evaluating a program that we would have them fill out that might amend our current final reporting process. But all in all, I think that we have a pretty solid process with the Public Arts Grant Program. So really this is trying to figure out what do we do for those projects that are large enough, and perhaps, and that I want to clarify too, because we say $5,000, and what I want to do in the grant design is really identify, as I have in your other sheet, this is before, a couple pages before, I believe, that kind of explains the grant changes. You know, having even more of a description than what is here under Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 to really help people understand what do we mean when we say a large-scale event? What do we mean when we say a festival? What kinds of risk do we tend to see, that sort of thing, so that we understand. It feels different to me to request an individual artist who's, doing their own solo exhibition of their work, maybe for the first time in public, and it feels very vulnerable to come and listen to a body of people publicly televised talk about their work and evaluate whether they deserve a grant. Feels much different to ask an organization with a fairly large budget, who we're saying that the budget represents, the budget request is only up to 70% of, or the match should be 70% of the total. So their budget must be much bigger to apply for that tier, coming in and asking them to be transparent with their financials and all of their things. That's a different request. And it could very well be in public, and I think that makes sense.
And I would add, and Eric can attest to this, is the reporting that the council gets from the various large recipients varies widely. So we don't have any particular reporting guidelines, or we kind of say, well, we'd like to know this, this, and this, but often don't get it. So it would kind of, again, standardize the reporting as well, which goes to being able to defend the, and justify the expenditure of the money and explain,
Right.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Eric.
I would just say, add as being part of that process, that I think consensus is we're fairly happy with the results that we've had, but I doubt that anybody on the council could really defend the process by which we've, and as the community grows more diverse, as we're more conscious of the role of the arts in the community, I think that process that we have had really becomes less and less adequate.
I do want to add one piece of clarification, just for commissioners who may not know. The special events do carry a contracted agreement. The agreement does require specifics and reporting, so it's not that there isn't a process. I don't want anyone to get that idea about our special event funding. And it does vary case by case, but some of that is actually a logic that we may find ourselves in as well. So for instance, an organization that has an annual or a monthly event, a monthly event would maybe report differently if they were being funded for a year than an organization that has a discrete, like, one-time event. And so we've, for instance, asked for reporting on a monthly basis or every 3-month basis of financial information if we're funding someone or promising someone money for a year. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to kind of clarify that, yes, the process doesn't always look the same, and I've not managed that process at all, so I actually don't have a lot of intimate knowledge, but just kind of being on the sidelines and seeing it happen, it's not that it is without process, and we would maybe find ourselves having to kind of tweak specific requests based on whether we're funding something as a discrete one-time event or something that is rolling. Does that make sense?
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question about number 7. So when they say accessibility, can you elaborate that a little bit?
Yeah, my guess, because although maybe Barbara or somebody who is part of the drafting of this might have more insights, but sorry to point fingers, Barbara.
I was.
As somebody
Is that one
who
of my
helped
comments?
formulate our commission,
go.
I tend to read that as just access to resources. So whether people have the ability to find artist opportunities, to engage in the arts, to find like monetary or otherwise non-monetary resources or venues or things of that nature. And so it would also, falling under that value, I would find things like our Art Expo that gives visual artists an opportunity to showcase and sell their work. Young Artist Studio, which reaches out to young people and invites them to learn about the arts and see them as an avenue for them as they get older. So that kind of accessibility is what I'm thinking of. But I'm curious.
Yeah, I had the same question. First, I wrote down the word "provide" and question mark. Are we providing resources, access to resources too? Will we have a link on the website, or how much? I mean, we're not necessarily in the business of doing that, but I was just curious what the process was going to be. If there was some thought about it.
Yeah, Brenda.
So I want to make sure the commission is considering this language in the context of the ordinance itself. So if you look at the ordinance, there's on the bottom of each page, it says the page number. So page 4 of 6, there's in a section on that page called duties. And number 3 in duties is where you find these priorities. And so the only reason we singled this language out is because we felt that, the language needed to be broadened to reflect the addition of culture in addition to the arts. And so you'll see the language wasn't really changed at all. It was just the same language carried forward, but the addition of arts and culture specifically to it. If you then look at this is not in a place in the ordinance where it's intended to holistically define everything that this commission does. But it is with regard to policies that you might propose for public arts projects, such as the involvement of artists in selected building projects, etc. I'm not really sure why they thought to add, newly stated priorities reflect, with respect to that list when you already have a mission and other things. But I just want you to know that these are sort of more of a subnote of a broader ordinance here. They aren't intended to be your kind of top 3 priorities for the program. And again, the only reason they're included in the motion is we just felt that the language there needed to be inclusive of culture in addition to the arts. So it kind of is what it is, but I can't really think of when in the last 10 years that we've really referred to this section of the ordinance in any detail. So I'm sorry if it's not really clarifying things. I wanted to sort of point out this isn't, it's sort of nested within the ordinance. I'm not sure it's the most important language.
Well, perhaps to your point, though, and to, I don't remember whose it was, but these priorities could actually be taken directly from our vision. So, for instance, priority 1 could be like opportunities to experience arts and culture in all of its forms as a priority, or maybe it's nurturing opportunities or providing opportunities. And then 2 could be celebrating creative expression, diversity, and creativity in public space. And embracing and celebrating diverse histories, beliefs, cultures within the city of Urbana. I do like the one about nurturing opportunities for collaboration and partnership in between artistic and cultural groups. But even right there, there's like kind of 4 priorities that would emerge out of our vision statement.
I have a clarifying question. So since these are nested under point 3, when it's talking about proposed public arts projects, is it talking about it narrowly like the building projects, or is it talking about it broadly like everything the public arts program does is public arts projects? On page 4 of 6, does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe it's referring to the duties of the body, right? And so the duty described under this one is to propose to the mayor and city council policies regarding the selection of proposed public arts projects, which
I guess that's
we largely haven't done, is sort of my point, that this body doesn't recommend a lot to the city to consider for greater action. The most likely scenario this would come, where this would be invoked, would be if the city built a new building as a result of the facilities study. That was the best path forward. And then the 1% for the arts fund is going to be involved, so the commission would likely play a role in that recommendation.
So this is talking narrowly about the building type projects. I'm trying to seek clarification on when we say public arts projects in that first sentence of point 3, are we talking about specifically the building initiative? Or are we talking about more holistically the public arts program? And the reason why I'm asking that question is because if it is broader, then maybe that language also should reflect culture. So I'm just trying to seek clarification on what are we talking about
I
when
think
we
it
say
should
that.
reflect culture. I think it is about the building projects, but it's also about the rest, because we have here also criteria for site selection, evaluation criteria for all programs.
Yeah.
That's roughly all programs that we do or
broad,
that we
yeah.
would fund.
And so, to me, that's part of, depending on, you know, if we are talking more broadly when we say public arts projects in current language, then it changes how we would recommend what we do with ABC than if it's talking narrowly about the buildings.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I-
So are there
Yep.
changes that any of you think you'd want to see to those A, Bs, and Cs, given that we're talking more broadly
Okay,
then?
Barb, you
I
want to
was
say
just going to
something?
add a little historic perspective since
Yeah.
I've been here since day one.
Right.
At the time, there were a lot of building and renovation projects going on, North Cunningham and South Filer Road, and so a lot of this came in within that context. We tried to look forward and anticipate opportunities to create new projects if necessary, but also keep something in mind for the commission to use if it was, so that's just where that came from.
Okay,
That was
that's
that was
helpful,
the
too.
thinking when it happened.
Gotcha.
But hey, we've been here 10 years, we need to,
Right.
we're looking at a new way of doing things or better ways, or celebrating what we did do. So. You were going to say something, I think. Was it, oh, it was you, yeah. I think it was Rachel.
Yeah,
I
Rachel.
had just asked if there was any specifics that you would want to see changed to these 3 points. I had suggested maybe drawing them directly from our vision statement. Other thoughts?
Yeah, Eric?
So with the understanding that nobody will probably look at this language for another 10 years. Nevertheless, I wonder if B might be artist accessibility to resources and audiences, because that came through in some of the elaborations that we discussed.
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
That would be 3B, artist accessibility to resources and audiences.
It's also listed under 7.
But the world will little note nor long remember what we decide here, in the specifics of what we decide here.
It'll be in the record.
It will be in the record, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think part of what throws me off is that the word should be access and not accessibility, because those are two totally different things.
Yeah.
Because we mean community access of, to arts and culture.
Thank you.
And then artist access to resources, which begs a such as. And then opportunities for collaboration and partnerships among and between artistic and cultural groups.
Right.
And then if in item 3 on page 4 of 6, if we change that in the second line to say selection of proposed public arts and cultural projects, such as,
Mhm.
but I also like the idea of, I mean, I think that the vision statement, tying the vision statement into those 3 items is a really nice way to clarify them, and it sort of ties everything together.
Yes, and your point on the lack of arts and culture in the body of number 3 on page 4 of 6 in there. We did not bother to list in this motion everywhere in the ordinance where the word arts or public arts appears.
Does it just automatically happen?
Well, staff would draft it that way.
Okay.
Because it's referred to throughout. So we would change
Just
the
revise it,
name
right.
and we would just revise it throughout
Okay.
to reflect that. Because there's certainly more places than that where
Yeah.
that needs
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
inserted.
So we just want to be consistent. Yeah.
Well, I guess the question is whether we want to stay with what we have here for those 3 items, the A, B, and C, or if we want to replace them with something taken from the vision statement. Right?
Do we vote on it? Is that a thing we vote on?
No, that's not a thing we vote on. I'm just trying to bring it
Oh,
together,
okay,
like this is
okay.
the next thing we need to do. Right?
Well, ultimately, you will vote on it, but
Oh,
we're
okay.
talking
Yeah,
about at the
yeah,
at
but
the end
we're not
once you
voting
determine
right
what
now.
those 3
Okay.
things are, yeah.
Yeah.
You, Janelle, pointed out something you liked of that Sarah side. Could you both restate that, because I didn't gather it, actually?
She was just saying access rather than accessibility.
Yes.
Mhm.
With the commas and the such as. I thought that was clear.
Can you speak into your microphone?
The use of access instead of accessibility
Mhm.
with the such as, and then referring back to number 3, which we then cleared up. I thought that was clear and changes the ambiguity of accessibility, which I think was my original question.
I thought I heard you actually say it as how you'd want it to appear, and that's what I didn't gather.
Oh,
I thought you said artist access to.
Access.
Access to, rather than accessibility.
Right.
I wrote it down, so.
yeah, artist access to resources such as,
And you mentioned and audiences.
Yes.
There was some discussion about
Resources and
Right.
audiences.
Yeah.
So the first one was community access to arts and culture. Then B is artist access to resources and audiences, possibly as such as there. And then opportunities for collaboration and partnerships among and between artistic and cultural groups.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
And the
think that
beginning
is,
was access,
Community
community
access
access
to.
to arts and culture.
Culture
Yeah.
and
Yep.
culture.
Okay. Could we add in all of its forms to, I guess,
Do we have to?
be consistent with our vision statement?
sure,
Sure.
in the first
If
one?
that's
or-
necessary.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying question too? 'Cause like for B, artist access to resources, that seems pretty obvious to me, like what resources would be, but could we elaborate on what audiences mean?
Audience is anybody who reads a poem, views a dance performance or video,
Sure.
views a piece of visual art or
Right.
sculpture.
My question is how as the commission would we have the ability to provide that audience?
Oh, because we,
Just through our normal promotions and
We
stuff?
provide venues.
yeah,
Yeah.
we provide venues and we promote events
Okay.
or exhibitions, yes.
I mean, one opportunity I see in the addition of you adding audiences
Uh-huh.
is perhaps adding the word access to diverse resources and audiences. That would actually point to a responsibility on this commission and program to deliberately do outreach to underserved populations in the arts and in cultural opportunities locally. And that might speak back to why we're expanding to arts and culture to begin with. That, to me, was how my brain read what you said.
Sure.
But I agree that we should all get on the same page about it. So does that seem like something that might be valuable, like adding a different
Yeah.
word, or maybe?
That's completely consistent with
Okay.
what I had in mind, yes, but I hadn't elaborated in those directions before I spoke.
That's helpful,
Janelle,
thank you.
did you
yeah,
have
or
some-
maybe, because I don't know that we can, well, it depends on how finite we're reading these, but perhaps educate audience rather than provide access to, with the intent that if we educate them, they can go and we
Do
can
we,
promote it.
or the
Mm,
word
I don't-
enrich?
Yeah,
Educate it makes it more narrow, I think.
yeah, educate sounds a
mean-
little bit patronizing.
And these are also
Yeah.
priorities. So I think it's about like what we find important for us to prioritize as a commission. And just like any goal, we'll fail. We won't always
Right.
we won't always live up to our values and expectations, but the design is like we ought to every time, right? So
Right.
I think there's some value in making a goal of this program to be doing the hard and deliberate work of reaching out to make sure our audiences are not necessarily always maybe even diverse at a discrete event, because let's be real, not everybody has I don't know, the exact same cultural interests, and we won't always find that particular kind of diversity that speaks to just having everyone and everybody's family there, right? But it could also mean that there's a diversity of options and for audiences to form through our programming or through the things that we fund. And I think this program has lived up to that quite a bit over the past few years that I've witnessed.
So then how would we defend our choice to still have the arts in the schools?
Defend the choice to have arts in the schools?
Yeah, I was just looking at our vision, or maybe I'm missing the emphasis on schools and education somewhere.
Well,
I think
Well,
that's just one part of what.
Schools is also
Right, yes.
fundamental to the accessibility of the arts, right?
Right.
Through our public education is usually how people are first introduced to the
Right.
arts. I personally think it would be easy to defend.
I was
Um,
just wasn't wondering if we didn't want to use the word education, where else
Right.
where else we would be seeing that.
Yeah.
I
I'm trying
think
to,
nurtures creative expression and builds creative public spaces are both things that happen with the arts in the schools.
Cool.
So would you then add that one as maybe a bullet point down in point 7?
I actually had that written down, nurturing creative expression and celebrating
It's part of it,
diversity. I
yes.
had combined it to nurturing and celebrating diversity and creative expression.
So is this a letter D in the motion, then? Is that what you're
Are
suggesting?
we
Yeah.
adding this?
So, do you want to clarify the language one more
Could you
time?
read
so
it
I can
out
write
loud?
it down, please?
Nurturing and celebrating diversity and creative expression.
So that sort of gives you the latitude
Mm-hmm.
to be broad, but also gives you some leverage at the same time.
So can I read what I have, and you tell
Yes,
me if
please.
you've
Yes,
written
please
the
do.
same thing?
Yes.
So under 7A, it says, reflect the following, this would now be 4 priorities with respect to the selection of proposed arts and culture projects. Community access to arts and culture in all of its forms, access to diverse resources and audiences, opportunities for collaboration and partnership among and between cultural groups,
Artistic and cultural.
Artistic and cultural.
artistic and cultural. I was like, I know I'm missing something. I accidentally crossed it out. And nurturing and celebrating diversity and creative expression. That would be
That's what I
D.
heard.
Yeah.
On your last pass through it, did the word artist disappear from B?
It did.
Did.
And-
Want to
and,
leave it
uh,
or
do
take
we
it out?
want-
No, let's leave it.
Okay.
Leave it in or leave it out?
What do you think?
Well, I thought that the whole sense of it was that we were providing for the artist
Yeah, I think,
resources and access to audiences.
I think we should keep it.
Yeah, so I
Yes, I
would
think
vote
so.
to keep artist in,
And
yeah.
can I add 2 words to the end
Yeah.
of it? Just because of the
Yeah.
diversity of the different kinds of arts that we, that we promote and that we enjoy. Can I add and participants at the end? Because some of the things, some of the programs don't exactly have an audience.
So
They-
artist access to diverse resources, audiences, and participants.
Yeah.
So that's B. All right, one more time. Community access to arts and culture in all of its forms. B, artist access to diverse resources, audiences, and participants. C, opportunities for collaboration and partnerships among and between artistic and cultural groups. And D, nurturing, it's not exactly, the English professor in the room, Sarah Jones, will have some, some recommendations here, but
that's
nurturing
exactly what I
suddenly
was working
and
on right
celebrating
there.
Would you
diversity
say
and creative
to
expression.
nurture? Instead of nurturing, to nurture?
How about
The other 3 don't have parallel structures.
commitment?
Help us
How
out
about
here, Seth.
commitment to nurturing and celebrating diversity and creative expression? We just add the word commitment.
Support. Yeah. That could be
I-
taken a different way, though.
When my daughter was in middle school, I had a fierce argument with the teacher about the appropriate use of gerunds, such as nurturing. And and they're wonderful words because a gerund is a noun, but it can actually take an object as if it were a verb. So nurturing is fine.
Nurturing's fine.
I think it's
Yeah, it's
fine,
not
too.
parallel construction.
We love our gerunds in Urbana, though.
So you do nurture and celebrate, something like that? Just make it,
I think starting with the the commitment, a commitment, or just commitment to nurturing and celebrating diversity and creative expression. I
Yeah,
think
that works for me.
That's fine.
I also like
agree.
that it's committed.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I hear a bit of a consensus, but are there any questions, comments, outstanding concerns about these 4 now priorities? What about any other piece here before we move this to a vote?
I had 2 questions. The first was sort of a logistical one. On point 6, it talks about approving and awarding at the $5,000 level. My experience with many juries is that oftentimes that request was made at $5,000. I've never seen one on any of the multiple juries that I sat on where it actually was awarded at that amount.
Right, but
So
we're now
maybe-
talking about the larger festivals, which weren't included before.
Oh, no, I mean, I was on a jury previously for the festivals, but just to complete the question, I'm curious, is 5,000, like, if they request 5,000, they're in that bucket? Or if they're awarded 5,000, then they're approved? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So trying to go back to my page on the grants. Because,
And then, like, the lack of parity with Tier 3, and does that make it complicated somehow, that Tier 3 is the 3,000 to 10,000 versus, like, a 5,000 to 10? I don't necessarily have an opinion about what the tiers are and what the amount should be, but it's just a...
That was, to build on that, I had a thought too, of, like, if an artist that was applying for, like, separate, like, arts grants funding, and they wanted to apply for greater than 5,000, would they have to go through would it trigger the same kind of process where they'd have to come and defend it up here? Or is that only for the special events stuff?
you said an individual artist?
Yeah, or any of the other categories not festival, but wanted 5,000 or more.
Yeah, I think under this they would. So it goes based on amount, not who's applying anymore. That's why we've removed all that information. I mean, we keep saying festival out of habit here,
Yeah.
but truly it's not necessarily festival. It's based in the amount that's being asked, whether it goes in Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. I do think the point that you made about Tier 3 beginning at 3,000 was it you, Katie? Maybe one for us to consider a good one, you know, like that. And as far as these details of the grant program that are also on your agenda for discussion tonight, we don't have to vote on this in particular. So we can make changes to this and to like the tiers, for instance.
So to improve the quality of the question I'm trying to get at, if I were a festival and I applied for 5,000 and the budget determined that I would be awarded 3,000, which process do I go through? Is the 5,000 based on how much I'm asking for or how much I'm getting?
Asking for.
Asking for, okay.
But it also, I mean, there's when we look at the match requirement, it's changing. We don't typically ask for a 70% match on our festival grants. We ask for a 50% match. But that might also encourage people to apply for a different tier. There will be different expectations, and we could even get more specific or maybe more constrained around what the highest tier would consist of. For instance, Tier 2 and Tier 3 as they're currently written, you could be requesting $3,000 and apply in Tier 2 and not Tier 3. And there might be a reason that you would want to, and it's because you have a smaller scale event. And you're not going to be asking for, $5,000 or something.
So, I mean, it's sort of a detailed language change, but it might just be helpful to say something like, for point 6, grants sufficient authority to the commission to approve and award grants and amounts requested at 5,000 and above. That's what I'm trying to drive at, is like, if someone feels like they're in the wrong process because the amount doesn't make sense to them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, perhaps if the clarification, when they go to apply, make the application is clear, very clear,
Right.
maybe that question will be removed, that confusion, but I can see where it could be ambiguous right now.
And yeah, so as we clarify the actual process for the grants, we could, this feasibly, for instance, the jury could actually, if we use a jury process first before, to vet things before they come as memos and proposals to you in person, they could have determined, for instance, that something is proposed and I guess recommended to be funded at 5,000 or above, and then we wouldn't need to put requested. We could go based on what the proposed or recommendation is or something, recommended as 5,000 or above. You know what I mean?
If the process determined was to do a jury and then bring it to the Public Arts Commission. Yeah, and I think that's part of where, it's just the way my brain works. I'm more of a process person, like knowing how the process would work there would inform then this other part. And then the second question that I had though was around the timeline again. So it sounded from Brandon that it's pretty imminent. Can you elaborate more on the timeline? Like if this were to be recommended by us and then go to City Council, like what does the actual timeline look like for us to determine that?
To go to ordinance, well, there's two timelines, okay? There's the administrative timeline that the Public Arts Program has an obligation to put out a grants program, regardless what happens in this process. Short of, the city eliminating all funding, we're going to move forward with the grants process in the next month, right?
Ideally.
So we don't need full resolution on really anything in this ordinance to move forward with that. And we're not changing anything in the program, at least that we've identified in these discussions, that are going to change how we do the grants program in a substantial way, with the one exception of major funds. And as we talked about, that's already been approved through a council process. And if the commission doesn't act, we would default back to having council make that decision, I believe, because I don't think we have another process by which we would do that. But it would still start as a arts grant application. It would still go through, it could still go through a jury process. It would be a staff memo, and it would go to the city. If the commission makes a recommendation tonight to move forward with changes to the ordinance, those would probably go to the council in December because of the holiday, I think. So we'd probably be looking at final approval before the end of the calendar year, possibly early next year. The reason that the ordinance is drafted, you received a motion, right? Staff prepared a motion for you, not an amended ordinance. It's because of the mechanics of how we go about amending that ordinance. We're going to rely on legal for that. Their time is valuable in that regard, so until we've really kind of crystallized what this body's asking for, there's sort of no point to go through the detailed process of that. That said, the only actual authority that you're really asking to change outside of the name of the commission and its mission and focus is adding that budgetary or that authority to approve those expenditures and those grants, those awards, which also, I think, in effect means, just as council approves it, they are in effect authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement. We have grants agreements with all of our recipients, so you're effectively authorizing staff to go enter into that agreement at that time. So
it sounds like it would be approved by City Council at the end of December or
Yes.
early January.
Mhm.
And then I'm trying to remember, I think the applications are usually due like in February or March and are approved by April, or can you just help me remember what that timeline looks like?
Usually I've already started advertising the arts grant, so in my mind, we're already behind on advertising that the arts grants applications are being received. And we had also wanted to maybe move that timeline up in the future. We don't obviously need to do that now. But we have, I believe, accepted applications till I want to say like end of January, early February. Or maybe it's end of January and then juries meet early February. And the beginning of March, we have notices go out. There's usually the sneak peek grants celebration in there, and then April 1st to April 1st the following year is the grant cycle.
Yeah. I was just kind of hearkening back to Sarah's point from early in the meeting as to if it's approved, let's say it was approved by council in December and we had to have a process by January 1. So I'm trying to figure out like what's reasonable logistically, that standpoint, because perhaps, you know, if the process, we want to make sure the process is sound or whatever, maybe it's worth saying, well, for this one last moment in time, council takes 1% of their time to approve these, and we develop a process that we feel really good about. So I'm sort of like playing those options out.
And that's fine. I mean, whatever you're comfortable with. And I will say, based on the feedback we get from the festival organizers, the earlier in the year they know that they can have funding from the city, the better, because that allows them to plan, so.
Or ideally 5 years in advance.
5 years in advance. Or multi-year. But no, yeah, so they appreciate, just like the recipients do.
And with the events, do they usually then approve it like in January or something, or is it like an ongoing thing?
Seems to be an ongoing.
And more of an ongoing
Yeah,
process?
yeah,
Okay.
depending on when the festival is.
Like
Go ahead.
a few meetings ago, I remember that the funding for special events, it's locked in till FY 2019, or when would we
that's a
take
good point.
when would we take over that part? Because it seems like we wouldn't be able to do that until like next year's grant cycle, right?
So we're currently in FY 2019, okay, because it's FY 2018,
Well, till the- would it be
2019.
like, yeah, but then 2020 would start in
So
like
that means
July, right?
the fiscal year we're in right
Right.
now ends on June 30th of
Yeah.
2019.
Right, yeah.
So on July 1st of 2019, we're in the FY 2020. So
Exactly.
this program, this grant cycle, will make awards for for 2020 for the festivals. The festivals will occur at that point in the year.
And they all occur August through November.
Right.
But that's a
So
really
that's-
salient
that's
point
what
that
I'm saying.
Jessica's making, is that it makes the timeline, it makes it easier to say, let's go ahead and figure that out later, because it is something that's a longer timeline. So that's a really excellent point, because
No,
if
we've
it's
No,
already
th-
decided for
there's-
this year,
No.
and we don't have to look at,
It's decided for the fiscal year that we're in, meaning that the Sweet Corn Festival that already occurred in this fiscal year, the Folk and Roots Festival, and Pygmalion, which have all already occurred in the FY19 fiscal year.
Oh, because they happen August through November.
you know.
Right.
They're
So
all
would the-
done.
would
yeah.
the,
They're all done.
but the
Right.
special events will be moved to the April to April cycle, just like all the rest of the grants? Or would
Well,
they remain on their,
notifications would, if
the
it stays the same
applications?
timeline
Yeah,
right now.
it may
Oh,
not-
okay,
It
so
might
then
not
it-
stay
okay,
April
so
to
then it
April.
doesn't change
We're
that.
making a
Yeah,
decision
okay.
for the next time those
Future.
festivals occur, which will be in the following fiscal year.
Mhm.
And because we've got our act together better, too, we're making financial commitments earlier than we have in the past, and that will cause a fund disruption of our financial system, because it's going to look like we spent $40,000 more, but we haven't. We just are making a decision to obligate funds sooner than we have in the past.
Right. Because it looks like we're spending next year's money in this fiscal
Yeah.
year.
And the new
Right.
financial system now accurately records what our future obligations are.
Right.
And I've been driving Rachel
But our
nuts.
grant program has always
with-
straddled fiscal years.
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
But we will be able to track it much, much better.
Yeah.
And with the use of purchase orders in the financial system, which, I've been driving Rachel crazy with, it's not straightforward, but when we do it that way, it records the liability, which is consistent with how we want to do things in the future. But I digress, I'm sorry. But there's no extra time here, unfortunately.
We're also adjusting to an entirely new financial system as well. So.
Good.
Just so I'm like totally, I understand this correctly. Like for an event that takes place in like November, the funds have been given to them for 2019. But like when would they need to like apply for 2020? Would that be this grant cycle now? They would.
The one coming
That's
up.
why there's no time.
For calendar
Right.
year 19, they
Right.
need to apply this cycle.
Right.
But
Okay.
the expense will show up in calendar, in fiscal year 20.
Calendar year 19 is fiscal year 20.
Well, right,
Yeah,
right.
we
No,
know
I
when-
understand.
Yeah, we know when the fiscal years
Yeah.
are, but just trying to
Okay.
figure out like what's been committed and in what fiscal year.
Right.
So under the old system, starting next January, February, we'd start getting calls from the festival organizers saying, well, so what can we expect for
Right.
August, September, October, November?
They're already calling.
We've already gotten
Yeah,
those calls,
it's
actually.
happening.
So then our
Yeah.
answer is
Like they
going to
don't
have
stop.
to be in January or February, we have a new process, and this is how you apply.
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean,
Right.
those people have been meeting with us since August to ask
For next
what's going on for next year.
Is that
Well,
something,
now you'll
is
be
that
able to
something
tell
you,
them.
is that something you feel prepared and like ready to take on and like really get something in that short time frame? Or would you rather have, or I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you think more time would be helpful or not? Or-
I don't see how this body or really anybody can grant us more time. There's an expectation from these groups that they want to know.
No,
So
no,
this-
I
We
know,
have
I'm
a
saying, I'm just
structure in
saying, like,
place,
from
too.
what Katie said earlier, like,
Yeah.
would this be like one more year to take it to city council while we really finesse this and get it
Yeah.
good and like the way we want it?
Well,
Yeah.
I've tried to be clear that if this body takes no action tonight and we shelve the idea of an Arts and Culture Commission tonight, we will still proceed with an arts grant program. That grant will include special event funding, and that approval will go to the city council in roughly the same time frame we've been discussing.
But I
So-
think what Jessica is
Yeah.
saying is that it buys more time for this body to determine a process by which we would proceed with the
Well-
5,000.
What process are you anticipating? Because this body doesn't approve the specifics of the.
Well, if this were approved, we would though, right?
And
For
we-
the 5,000 and
right.
above?
And I think there's been a lot of discussion here about item 6 on this, and I think like if we could all like be more reassured in how that process is going to work, I think everyone would be more.
Well, you can change,
Enthusiastic,
you
I
can
don't know.
change, expand it to arts and culture now as a policy decision, and then if you feel like you need one more year to work out the details of a particular process,
Will go to council in the
we'll
spring.
just continue
Right.
the festival funding one more time, and people will be in my office for
But-
one more year.
But staff will still have an obligation to, we will still ask for them to submit as part of the arts grant program.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the final determination won't occur by this body, it would occur by council. But I personally don't see any advantage to delaying because it would be preferential for this body to assume that role now. You're arguably, I think you could make a good case that you're much better prepared to make that decision now, just based on the amount of knowledge and experience you have in reviewing and discussing applications with the many recipients, as compared to our council, which spends very little time on this particular topic.
Go ahead, Eric.
As the one person who sits on both the council and this body, and given the essence of the issue, which is should these decisions rest with the council or should they rest with this body? My opinion is that the public will be better served, the artists will be better served if the decision devolves to this body. As ill-equipped as you may believe you are,
No, I don't think it's about that at all.
I can
No.
compare how ill-equipped you are to how ill-equipped the council is.
I mean, just to clarify, I think long-term, I think what I've heard here today is that everyone believes what you're saying already.
Yeah.
The question that keeps coming up in my mind and what I'm hearing from the group is, from a process standpoint then, how does the ball roll down the hill? I don't think anyone's arguing that this group is not equipped or better equipped to make that decision, at least from speaking for myself. I think I agree with that point 100%. It's more about, well, then in the 2-week turnaround or the 3-week turnaround or whatever it is, are we comfortable then saying what that process is, rolling it out and all of those things versus, and the transition and the change and impact that that has on people who apply to the program. Because if they're accustomed to this city council way now, and there's sort of this disruption and we don't have it figured out and it's sort of, chaotic, I don't know. It's hard for me to say what that looks like. And I think that's more what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the final decision of who would, who would be better suited.
That's exactly what I agree.
So what I think would work is, just an idea, is since we would essentially be in charge or be helping decide this new chunk of money, because the regular stuff will stay how it always does, whether
Right.
we make any changes or not. I think, I don't think enough people know about the special events funding, and I think if we can even say, hey, it's available, and let's have you come to us and apply, we have these grants funding, I think it would be fine. I don't think a lot of people will be upset that they now have to apply to a new place. And we can sort of see who comes out of the woodwork maybe, and perhaps maybe it won't be as big of a transition for those groups to suddenly apply to this new thing. And then we can even see, we'll use the same process we've done before, and we can make adjustments to the programming, if I'm understanding it correctly, as we go. And then once we do one cycle, it'll be easy to sort of say, oh, that was really great, or that thing was really terrible. So that we at least have the way to move forward. Otherwise, like you said, it's just going to be the same again.
And so it could be, if everything goes through today, like in our like January or February meeting, like would we have, people could potentially come and present stuff to us, right? And we'd have to like vote on their, like, whether or not they get their grant. That could happen potentially as soon as February or March next year.
We'd have longer
Yeah.
meetings.
Well, it only occurs once a year, and only if you request that budgetary authority and council grants it. Only in that scenario.
Well, right, yeah, yeah. So it's a potential to happen. So yeah, okay.
But the
Yeah.
staff preparation that goes into preparing a recommendation for this body is no greater than what we put into preparing a recommendation for the city council. So staff will have to respond, modify the grant program, and form a recommendation for a public body. By postponing your decision, you are not changing the work staff has to get done or the timeline. The only thing that you're preventing is that that decision come before this group as opposed to the council. I just want to be clear about that. Our grant recipients are going to be impacted irrespective of how this decision is made. The decision's already been made by the mayor that the process won't be the same anymore. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay.
Understood.
Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
Just knowing people as I do, when amounts of money like even this, relatively small amount of money are involved, I think it's going to be important to tell the people who are accustomed to getting X amount of dollars from the city council that we are not the city council. And when they apply this year, there may be changes. And when they apply next year, there's going to be a different process. And they may find themselves in a totally different situation than they have been before. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. Things change, and that evolution of, once we get, I have a feeling that once we get this process really secure and make it easier for people to apply, and so that more people know about this sort of thing, if we are doing the things that we say that we're going to do, there are going to be a lot more people who come to us and want money. And that's going to mean that some of these people who, I hate to use the word entitled, but feel like because they've had this money before that we owe it to them again, are going to be a little heated about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a really good, hey, listen, you need to know this is coming down the pike, it would
Yeah.
not go amiss.
I mean, to reassure you, all of these groups that have maybe traditionally relied upon these funds or come to see themselves as habitual applicants to the special event have been told that there are changes coming, and have been told that right as soon as you all voted and adopted the special event funding as now under the authority of the Public Arts Commission, we're told that that change had already happened. So, to my knowledge, every group that you would see as who has received the funding before already do know that.
And I don't think you'll be inundated. I mean, putting on a festival is a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the people that have already been planning it that are going to apply and know that this funding are here, at least for this first year, especially if we're talking about keeping our dates relatively the same. and our grant cycle relatively the same. It doesn't give me much time to get information
Right.
out and all of that.
Right.
I think just to express my reflection on this meeting, I need some sort of decision to move forward. I need some sort of decision from the commission to be able to know my next step for getting our grant program underway.
I think we can do this. I do. I mean, with the understanding that in the beginning, we're just going to have to see what it's like, and to be really honest with each other and with grant applicants and with you about what's working and what's not, and be prepared to say, okay, well, that didn't go very well. Let's try this instead. And as long as we're open with ourselves and the grant applicants and with you, and I think I think it's doable.
I agree.
I think it's doable, but I think where I stand on it is that I would be a lot more comfortable if there was kind of that process laid out, because I think it would be healthier for applicants, and I think it would be healthier for the program. So that's where I'm at with it. I think it's possible. Is it, is there a way to avoid a rough and tumble? I think there is. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Barb, go ahead.
The suggestion is one, the verbiage, but the other one is the process that the applicants go through going to be substantially different than it has been in the past, other than they're applying to this body with more authority? You're going to vet people the same way and have juries to vet their applications, right? That's not going to change, is it?
Well, I think that's what's open to question right now.
That's what I mean.
Coming into this meeting, I think there's a question mark around the $5,000 and up. As far as, are we using a jury process, or are we using more that vets and then brings to have final approval from this body with memos, with people coming with their proposal, you reading it over, and them making their case to you? Or is it more of a process that skips to that only, as the special event funding has in the past to City Council? But those are kind of the two options I see. I don't see many more options than that. And then anything below 5,000 would keep at the regular jury process, which, as a reminder, still comes before you. But
Right.
in my time, I haven't seen somebody like veto or try to, assert an authority, because we haven't really had the commission have that authority completely. It's more just like
Because we've always been advisory.
nod.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly,
Yeah.
advisory.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, but neither of these scenarios implies necessarily any change in the application process as the
Right.
applicant goes through it.
Right.
That I would suggest that that certainly in this first year, that there should be no change in the process from the application point of view. There would be a change in how it's reviewed, but I don't think that I think that trying to tell those applicants at this stage that they've got to do something different, significantly different, prior to application, I think that's probably not fair.
Well, what I had brought here was the proposal that includes amending the names of categories and the amounts of categories. Some of them aren't exactly amended. So for instance, like arts in the schools is the same. It's up to $3,000, and we put a minimum on there of $500. It really just reflects what we tend to see. Like the smallest amount applied for is usually about $500. But Arts in the Schools has also been a separate grant program on a completely other timeline, and I'm certain a lot of thought went into that, but for the benefit of one staff person, it would be helpful to have not 3 different timelines for the special events, our grant program, and Arts in the Schools, but to streamline them. And we can still make it so that, notifications go out in April and it applies to the next school year. I think the way we had done it before is that Arts in the Schools would be getting notifications like a month ago, and they could start things this spring or the following fall. But if we keep it on the same timeline, they're just applying for the next school year,
Right.
which is,
And
seems logical
that
to me.
came out of because the teachers all said they could not,
Get
they didn't
applications
have
together.
application in time for the other grant categories. And so rather than let them,
Yeah.
leave them out in the cold, we developed that program.
Yeah.
But I can see the consistency of unifying the same application timeline as, I mean, unless you want to become
And I
an
have a lot of
octopus.
empathy for planning around the people who procrastinate and wouldn't like
There's
do
only
it
so much
months
you
when
can
they
do.
have more time, because I could be that person, but
Yeah.
you know, I think it's also about just knowing when the deadlines are and communicating them. So as soon as we do know, I'll be able to get that information out.
Yeah, because you have to process it, so much of it. Oh, makes sense.
But I heard a recommendation from Eric to not change anything about the grant program, and I don't want to be disingenuous because there are changes that are proposed. I'm proposing changing the categories a little bit. The proposal also includes a poet laureate program, so designating $2,000 of our overall monies to support a poet laureate program, and then to combine arts in the schools with the regular grant cycle. The tiers are roughly what the tiers for individual, group and nonprofit and festival are. And that's actually more reflected in that 3,000 to 10,000 is really because our festivals have really kind of been less than that, honestly, but sometimes more around the $2,000 to $3,000 amount.
Yeah, my remarks really, my remarks really were focused on the festival applications. And
Tier 3.
yeah, tier 3,
Yeah.
because
They don't have to be festivals necessarily.
yeah, tier 3, because we don't, I think that, I think actually it'll help us to, I wouldn't know how to decide on a brand-new process without going through the process of looking at this first round of tier 3 applications and fielding them, and then we might be, equipped after having done that to say, oh, yeah, well, maybe, the application process should be different in this way or that way. But I think prior to doing that, I just don't think we would have any ability to do that.
Go ahead.
So just to be really clear, so if what we're voting on today is not just like forming the Arts Commission and the verbiage, but also taking the power, which sounds really weird and awful, to like judge on that, the large amounts, the 5,000 and above, and changing the names of the categories? Okay,
None of the
sorry.
details of the grant program
Okay.
require a vote.
Okay, just checking.
But Mike, I guess a question in my mind that's come up through this discussion is, can this commission remove number 6 and otherwise adopt a ordinance, or does it need to be?
Number 6 being,
You mean
The authority
Yes.
question, if
Yeah.
it's giving
Yes.
concern. Can it be
Right.
removed entirely and the commission
it can
still
be
vote on
removed.
arts and culture?
entirely, yes.
Can-
But the consequence of that will be, given the time constraints, that staff will pursue a process that culminates in council approval in this coming year for arts grants.
Could we take
Go
it
ahead,
later?
Mayor.
What's that?
Could we take it later then? No.
For the large amount ones.
Yeah.
Well, remember, you're asking for something here, and just a mild political consideration is it's easier to ask for things altogether. If you come back later and ask at a later time, after council tries out the new process, maybe they like it, I don't know. We don't know what their feeling will be, so this body cannot control the outcome, that you can get this, you can ask for it any time. You can certainly do that. So that,
But you may not get
but
it.
you can certainly,
Right,
you can
right.
take it out, you can take out anything in this
Yeah, well,
recommendation.
yeah, that's true. Go ahead, Eric.
So I'd like to just make a motion on the particular point and move that this commission accept the responsibility and authority to approve and award grants in amounts of $5,000 and above.
I second it. Do we want to call for a vote on it then?
Was this an amendment to the motion? I
Well,
didn't understand. I'm sorry.
it's a, you know,
Standalone.
it's a standalone
Okay, I
motion. And then it could be followed by a motion to approve the
Approve the
entire
rest.
recommendation, but
Got
this
it.
seems to be the most contentious item,
Mhm.
so maybe it can stand by itself.
Yes. You could vote on each of these one at a time if that's your
Yeah.
preference.
Shall we do that?
I think that's proper procedure.
Do we want to vote on them all together or vote on them one at a time? Is there a rule? Does anybody
can do
know?
Well, the
Right.
question,
You can
know,
make
we're
independent
proposing
motions.
voting
Yeah.
on just whether or not we're going to take on number 6
Oh, okay.
versus, and then voting separately on the rest of it.
So Eric made a motion,
Okay.
the item that's most in question, you made a motion to
Yeah.
approve,
Right.
and it was
Yeah.
seconded.
Yeah.
So now the body can make a decision on just that one, and then you can move on to the rest, and you can split out others as necessary if you so choose.
Okay.
And I know
Alright.
you've already been discussing, but isn't there discussion at this time as well, when a motion's been made?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
More discussion? Do we want more discussion?
I just had one quick question, but legally, we are allowed to do that, right? Even though we're not employees, we're advisory.
Legally allowed to.
City legal, I always hear this term.
To
We're an
divide a
advisory
motion?
board. No, and just, if we were to accept it and vote to accept that responsibility.
You were voting to request that responsibility.
yeah,
Um,
okay, yeah, I'll vote to request. I'll take that as that's an appropriate amendment. I vote to request the authority to approve and award grants in amounts of $5,000 and above.
Okay, and I'm seconding it, and then we take it to a vote, correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, any discussion? Do you want additional discussion?
I don't think there's anything more to discuss at this time.
Anybody want to beat this horse even deader than it is?
Okay, all who are in favor say aye, and
Aye.
lift your hand, please, so we
Aye.
count.
Aye.
All not in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Well, I think it passed.
Since Suki's not here,
Oh.
would you please just, could I just call a roll, I guess, or could we
Okay,
just,
Sure.
I think it's still being recorded though, right?
oh, you're right, we do have the video.
Yes.
So
Because she
as long as
transcribes from the
Jason got
video.
that, but just let the record show that Jessica Snyder and Katie Harrell were opposed.
Right.
And so what will happen is that because the motion passed, and we'll deal with the rest of it in a second, but staff will ensure that the memo that goes to council accurately reflects that there was opposition, and we'll do
Right.
our best to try to explain why that is, so that council can take that into consideration. Okay?
Okay. So then we need to vote on the rest of it. How would I word that?
We could vote to approve the staff recommendation. I guess there were a couple of them, the staff recommendation as amended by staff during the course of the meeting.
Right?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve this recommendation as amended by staff during the meeting.
Okay.
Do we have to list the parts?
So all parts but 6, right?
Yeah,
Since we already voted on 6?
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, to approve the rest of the recommendation.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
Oh, second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye and hold your hand up.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That is passed.
I think, and just for posterity, when you take this, when you want to like describe our opposition to it, I think
Mhm.
Yeah,
our
please.
my main objection, I won't speak for you, but it's just that I just want more details on how that process is going to work, and like how people are going to come to us, and just if it's going to be like the way like with a memo and then people come present to us, or if they're going to go through the jury first. I just want to know how that's going to work.
Yeah, and I would agree if it's helpful as you take that forward, is that I've just had experience that tells me it's helpful to know that process ahead of time. And given the tight turnaround, I think it's just healthier for applicants and healthier for the process if it's all figured out ahead of time.
Agreed.
And that's where I'm at with it.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm making note of that. Thank you.
Let's see.
No.
She's got to go.
That's what I was worried about, too.
I don't want to be preemptive, but I don't know
Yes.
if we need to make a motion to adjourn, because I also have another commitment I have to leave, and I don't
Okay,
want to leave.
we
you
don't
guys.
have anything else to vote on,
I think
so.
we're, are we
Okay,
done
so
with
it's-
the,
that's fine to just take off.
agenda?
Yeah.
Okay,
Did
sounds good.
Well-
Get everything that was
Yeah.
on the subject
Did-
today?
Rachel, did you still want to go ahead with the staff report, or? Okay,
I prepared it.
okay.
Okay.
I'm just, can we say for the recording that Janelle Okerton and Katie Errol have left the meeting, and we have lost quorum at this point.
Right,
Yes, we legally have
Right.
to
But we
do
can
that.
continue to hear a staff report.
right.
This is your November staff report.
But you can share this with the people who left, too, right?
Yes, and they can watch it on TV.
There you go.
Well,
And they
they've
got a
in
copy
the
of it.
We've got it in the packet,
In the
right?
mail. Okay, let's begin with some of the upcoming programs that we have going on. These are current projects that continue into the November month. Open Scene Open Mic, our collaboration with the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center, has the next scheduled open mic taking place this tomorrow on November 14th, 2018 at the IMC. It will feature host DJ Silky and an IMC open house. If you haven't yet been to an Open Scene Open Mic, please come out and support these efforts. Our art, oh, and here it is, just for a little bit more information, 6 to 8 p.m. tomorrow. Our Art Now features Patrick Earl Hammy, visual artist and associate professor at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. This, again, is our public mini documentary series on artists that live here locally, and airs every Monday on UPTV 6 at 6:15 p.m. with reruns at 11 p.m. on Tuesdays. You can learn more about Patrick Hammy's art at patrickearlhammy.com. Artist of the Corridor has wrapped up our exhibit called Loom Beadwork with Judy Spencer. These are some pictures with Judy in front of her art. If you didn't get a chance to see some of her loomed bead pieces, they were quite beautiful. Our next one is called I Like to Jump Like a Horse, and it's by Angela Inez Balduz. She's also a grant recipient this year for another project called The Confessional, so you may recall hearing about her work there. This one includes a opening reception November 29th, 4:30 to 6 p.m., and a closing reception on December 13th that will also feature an artist talk. You can see the advertisement for the artist talk on the bottom half of your screen. 6 to 7 at the Lewis Auditorium in the Urbana Free Library. Our artist talks are aimed to be family friendly, so we encourage you to bring children. There's usually a show and tell with some of the artist's tools, and she walks you through her process. Art at the Market continued with Market at the Scare as our final farmers market. Was a great success. I think we spoke with the farmers market director, and as a result of Market at the Scare, numbers were doubled that month for the farmers market attendance. The event featured a wide array of family-friendly activities, spooky stories from the Urbana Free Library, fall games, a pop-up photo booth, trick-or-treating at vendor booths, face painting, paper crafts, and more. The featured workshop was Make a Monster Craft with Melissa's Monsters, and we had haunted tunes from the Urbana Pops Orchestra students. Here's some pictures from the event if you weren't able to come out. You can see also on the left of your screen the members of, midway down the page, we have the members of Spread the Magic at Illinois State University who came dressed as Disney princesses to interact with the children, and then we had members of the UIUC Star Wars Club also there cosplaying, taking photos with students. At the very bottom of your screen, you see Gumby and Maleficent, and they were actually out doing a photo booth, not at this event, but the night before at the Downtown Trick or Treat, sponsored by the Urbana Business Association and Urbana Free Library. Urbana Public Arts had a pop-up photo booth for kids, and they were out there cosplaying. Fun fact, the photo on your right lower corner is actually a pregnancy reveal photo. So the family shared this photo.
Oh, sweet.
Later on their Facebook page, you'll notice she has a
Oh, I
thing
see.
3 on her
Doing
belly
3.
to announce that they were having
Very
a
sweet.
child soon. So that was a really sweet share of our public arts photos on Facebook. And the top right corner is, or left corner is the puppet display and workshop from the School for Designing a Society, and the top right is the Urbana Pops Orchestra.
So it's a good PR, Rachel. Good things happen at the market.
Good things happen at the market. And if you didn't see the recap video about Market at the Scare by Urbana Public Television, I shared it on our social media pages, but it featured about 5 different interviews with kids under 5 about
Aw.
Market at the Scare, and it's pretty funny. Next we go indoors with the Urbana Business Association's Market in the Square. And this is the last year we did this as similarly workshops and concerts. We found it a little bit challenging with our budget to do both. So this year we're just going to do the indoor concerts. And the concerts will take place every second Saturday of the month at 10 a.m. The first one is the Chickadee Sermon, playing on December 8th. So come out for that. Another update we have is Young Artist Studio continues. We had a Zentangle for Kids workshop with Gayatri Meniki this past October. And then on the 18th coming up, we have a seed collage workshop with local artist Anna Barnes. So kids will get a chance to make a seed collaged ornament. I want to also mention, another piece of good news about Young Artist Studio. We've been able to increase the honorariums a little bit for next year. And we're working with, I've been privileged to work with Shimei Carmody at the Urbana Free Libraries Children's Department. She's retiring, so I'm now going to be working with Lauren Chambers, and I'm excited to work with her. She recently accepted the position of Outreach and Events Specialist for the library, so that's a promotion for her. So if you see her, you should congratulate her. I also want to mention that the major thing we have going on this week, apart from Open Scene tomorrow night, is our sculpture installation. So as you know, we installed ice pops earlier this fall, and you would, judging from the photos, think it was summer, but it was only a couple months ago. And just in time for lots of snow, we have the new one going in on Saturday, so pray that the ground isn't too frozen. Races is going to be installed by Bobby Joe Scribner on the corner of Race Street and Green Street, and it's along the Illinois Marathon route. I'm happy to report that I've been in touch with the staff that run the Illinois Marathon. They're very excited that the sculpture is going there. We're trying to work out an arrangement for having it be a stop along the marathon for photos, and they typically have a big blown up photo of sometimes the alma mater or other images from around town, and we're proposing that this be the photo that's blown up that people can take pictures of themselves in front of before the race. So the installation celebration is this Saturday. It's from 3:30 to 4:30 on that corner. If it is very, very cold, we will be inside in the Lewis Auditorium at the library. I also want to mention another important development for the arts program. One of the things that has been happening is some planning meetings between the Public Arts Program, the Urbana Business Association, 40 North, and the Urbana Park District to develop a downtown events series. This would be a monthly sort of downtown festival that would happen once a month in the summer months. And so we've been talking about May through August, culminating then in the Sweet Corn Festival in September. So that's been underway. These partners are really enthusiastic, and we continue to meet to draft budgets and plans for what that will look like. But I wanted to update you on that, since I'm not sure the Commission has heretofore been informed that we've been toying with these ideas of having a downtown event series. And so we're excited about that.
I just have a question in relation to that, because 40 North has always had that Friday night series. Is
This wouldn't
in
be
place
Friday
of?
nights.
It's in addition to?
In addition to.
Okay.
It's having something in downtown Urbana.
Okay.
And so we've been talking as partners about who will take on what roles and how we will work collaboratively together. And it's been really enthusiastic and positive meetings. We've met probably about 4 times, and a meeting tomorrow to talk more about budgets. So we'll have some more updates on that hopefully next month.
Great.
And as it comes down the pipeline, I'll have more thrilling news, such as like what it will entail and what kinds of performances or other things people will see. Lastly, your social media marketing report. We've seen an increase in Facebook and Instagram, Twitter not so much. That's been a common story. I don't know if Twitter is just less used. I use it less, so maybe it has less of an impact.
Did the election do
I post
something?
more photos and things on Instagram.
I think the election had something to do with that.
And then we continue to seek volunteers for programs. I really want to emphasize this. I recently had my intern leave, so she had to resign early. She's also studying abroad next semester. So I'm going to be doing a process for hiring another intern. But in that time, I really am the only person running all these programs, so it's really helpful to have volunteers. So if you know other people who'd like to get involved, please send them my way. And that's really it.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Did anybody have any announcements? Oh,
Oh, I just wanted, for your volunteers, are you looking for someone to come help you, like, in the office or, like, at special events?
both?
Both? Okay.
Both. Office stuff, it's unless it's consistent, it's very hard to plan around.
Right, yeah.
So, but even if it's like 1 hour a week, but I know the person's coming in, that's helpful. I had, as you might recall, I had been collaborating with the Community Learning Lab on the U of I campus through the School of Social Work to have a regular student. Over the summer, they don't do that program, and in the fall, I wasn't selected for one of the they just have a surplus of folks, but I'm going to reiterate interest for the spring semester, so I'll hopefully have a student from that too.
Okay. Just wondering.
okay.
I technically had a grant presentation, but I think we talked about it a lot, so I don't know.
Oh,
asked
you mean
for
about the
announcements, and I think you were going to end the meeting, and I'm saying there actually is another agenda item.
Oh,
but
we kind of
Do you
have
need to
talked about
table
it.
it?
Do we need to talk more, or,
I don't think so.
Probably overloaded today.
some people have left already too, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wish everyone a happy, joyous Thanksgiving.
Yes, yes, very good.
Yeah, everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the nicest commission in the city.
Well, thank you, thank you.
That's why I volunteered for it.
Are there maybe some social groups on campus that might be looking for opportunities to help
Yeah.
volunteer, of
I mean,
sororities
having, for
or?
instance, some of those groups that came out to market at the square, or scare was so wonderful. And
Yeah.
I'll be reaching out to the Office of Volunteer Programs and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
I move
Thank
that
you.
we adjourn. Can I have a second?
Second.
All right.
So
Thank you very
made.
much.